that everyone, my hope would be, would also get to have the experience of really uncovering who you truly are.
The Compromised to Alchemized podcast with me, your host, Dr. Neil Bolchandani. On this podcast, I get to interview healers, artists, thought leaders, all kinds of people. And I feel like we need another category almost every time. So with this, especially Deborah Eden Tull, as she carries such a deep and expansive, I believe, perspective on life. And let me tell you about who she is, and then I'll tell you how we met. So, Eden is the founder of Mindful Living Revolution. She's a Zen Buddhist teacher, author, animist, and spiritual activist. She spent 7 years as a monastic at a silent Zen Monastery and has been engaged in sustainable communities for 30 years. She teaches dharma intertwined with post-patriarchal thought and practices, resting upon a lived knowledge of our unity with the more than human world. Her books include Luminous Darkness, an Engaged Buddhist Approach to Embracing the Unknown, Relational Mindfulness, a handbook for deepening our connection with ourselves, each other and our planet in the natural kitchen, a guide to the sustainable food revolution. Those are the three. Eden also facilitates the Work That Reconnects, as created by Buddhist scholar Joanna Macy, and conscious dance embodiment practice. Eden's teaching style is grounded in non-duality, mindful inquiry, somatic awareness, and an unwavering commitment to personal and collective awakening. She also leads embodied leadership and facilitation trainings based on deep listening and relational presence. She's been teaching Dharma for over 20 years and has been immersed in meditation and earth stewardship since 1992. Eden and her husband Mark lost their home in a dramatic series of events in Hurricane Helene in the fall of 2024 and have been navigating their lives as climate refugees ever since. That is how I came to meet Eden. She reached out via email, and then when her and her husband Mark were in the area here in the SoCal, she started coming in to my office here in Santa Barbara, and that's how we met. And since then, I believe I don't have everything down linearly. But they were here, but then they moved back to Hawaii, maybe somewhere else in between. So we've had this amazing conversation that you'll hear. But yeah, that's not how we met. Email that she sent was how we first connected. And as I explained, she came in, and then we've had many, many text conversations, voice memos, and some phone calls to talk about the in-betweens, but especially about the care that she sought out when she came into my office. But how did she know about me? So it was through her brother-in-law, Rob De Aquila, who's a phenomenal chiropractor, applied kinesiologist, very out-of-the-box thinker who practices in Manhattan, New York. And he came to a training that I did in Reading, January of last year, before we moved here to Santa Barbara. I did an airway-centered training there before I left, and that would have been in January. That would have been, back in 2025. So when Rob came for the training, and then he actually came in for a session, so we've kept in touch as well. I believe he heard me on Ben Greenfield's podcast, the Wellness podcast, and I think it was after he heard me on that podcast and he heard about how I was talking about the tongue and the floor of the mouth and all of that. Then he reached out, and anyways, it's amazing that led to me getting in touch with Eden. She reached out and was thinking of doing a virtual session because she wanted to, just find keys for healing what she was going through in terms of her airway-related issues. But, as I found that she was going to be in the Woodland Hills area where I went once a week, but as it went, she ended up coming in person instead. So that was great. And yeah, side note, I'll actually be seeing Rob in Manhattan August 21st, 22nd, around that time. I'll be doing an event with Melissa Mugno at Dr. Gelb's office in Manhattan. After that, I'll be going to Long Island to do a training, and that's going to be epic. So Rob and I connected because I'll be very close by, and he's going to come, so we can do some funny work and all that. But I'm excited. This conversation is so good. I really feel like Eden carries so much knowledge and expertise and wisdom. And so you're going to like that. We started out the conversation just chatting, and so a little bit of that edited out. So my hope is that what you hear is instructive, enlivening, and you find the not only inspiration from her story and also from her wisdom, but that you just feel that this conversation does some kind of uh, I would say enlightening, but she talks about more than that, the polarities of light and dark, and of course, diving into the complexity and the breadth of our human existence. So tune in as you experience this. I really hope that you can share this with someone who you know needs this. And as you're hearing the music, it's Smokeless Fire by Michael Gunger. Also, just really, really looking forward to seeing you. I feel like for me, I just told you before we talked, I'm feeling broody and contemplative. It's like the weather, but also we just moved. And I feel like I've just put out a lot of effort to move things, material things. And I think anytime I'm stuck in materials too long, I lose a little sense of the ethereal. So,
Mm.
can I ask you, would you, whether it is like a word or a paragraph or even a mini meditation, and I think this would serve others as well. Can I ask you to bring color to someone who maybe is in a broodier mood than they want to be? That's me. So I would love for you to share some words or even a way for us to dive into a place of expansiveness. And I really want to make sure that I allow your gifts to shine here.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you for all of what you just shared. And I think I might start by just inviting us and everyone listening to take a moment in the way that feels authentic, to ground a little bit, maybe just to feel the weight and shape of our body resting in the earth. Give a little more of our weight in surrender to be below. Maybe we'll take in a few conscious, full body breaths together just to arrive more fully in presence. As you just mentioned, getting a little caught recently in the material world. When we take a pause and rest in embodied presence, we get to let the mind of material, the relative world, the minutia of the day, the conceptual mind. We get to let it dissolve a little bit and just settle in a more curious, wakeful, um, somatic stance towards the moment. You used a phrase earlier, you were talking about when we don't turn away, when we, in the language I would use, embrace both the light and shadow, we recognize the value of learning to turn towards rather than away from everything that arises, and how to meet what's here with more of a wakeful curiosity,
Mm.
more of compassionate neutrality. That's the field in which curiosity lives. Than the conceptual mind that immediately goes to judging and categorizing everything, right? As good, bad, right, wrong, better, worse, light, dark. So you named being in kind of a broody mood. Maybe there are listeners who can resonate, kind of feeling stuck in a little bit of an emotional patterning today. I love the simplicity of just befriending whoever is here. And by whoever, I mean whatever part of us is here. Just like it's okay, you're here. Welcome to the field. I'm not holding expectation that you're not here. I'm not trying to transcend whatever's arising from the earth, from my body, from emotion to get to some other state. The state of compassionate neutrality is an incredibly wise field that welcomes everything. And for me, I would say someone who's we point into in Buddhism the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows, and that's all part of the human experience. None of it needs to be categorized as better or worse. But for me, someone who's been through a lot of beauty, unsurpassable, immeasurable, unfathomable beauty, and a lot of challenge, a lot of trauma, I spend as much time as I can hanging out in that field of uh, kind neutrality, welcome, letting life be as it is. And we don't just stop there, letting life be as it is. There's a return that happens to clearer seeing, seeing from the heart rather than seeing from the dualistic, really story based mind of duality, the binary perception. And it's not that we just land in that more open neutrality, it's that in that pause, resting in that openness, then we get to access a deeper intelligence and a more conscious response to what's happening. The response might take an expression of gentle compassion, just being with what is, or fierce compassion. So it's not a neutrality that points to spiritual bypass in any way. It's just let's start by befriending what's here. I find it quite exhausting the degree to which humanity, or we might say the dominant paradigm, has very much undervalued the simple spirit of befriending and befriending what is.
Mm,
Yeah,
yeah. Well,
yeah.
thank you. Yeah, that's it. I feel that you said something right at the beginning that helped me, and also that I think really follows in a through line to befriending, because you said turning into, uh, uh, as opposed to fleeing from, or
Mhm.
back in the day, and if I wanted to get rid of a thought, or I wanted to, I think you were speaking about this, and acknowledge the parts of us that are here. I would do this, like, and that
Mm.
was my way of wiping away and clearing, and almost like saying, "Go away." But in one way, it's like that's almost a pathway of dissociation versus acknowledgement and welcoming, and then turn. So, for you, is there another simple way you like to turn into things, or fun ways, or even like somatic ways, or what are some times
Right.
when you like to turn in, and how do you do that?
First, let's go to your language of alchemizing. When
Mhm.
we, instead of turning away from, uh, we turn towards and we really welcome and be with what is, we alchemize. We bring into wholeness what is. We bring into wholeness, perhaps a part of us or an emotion that maybe habitually we would want to push away or shadow, that which we perceive as different from how we like to be seen or identify. There's so many ways in which we can alchemize, bring into wholeness what is. But it really goes back to that phrase of seeing what is from the heart, rather than seeing through the conditioned mind or mind of separation that's constantly, really constantly, if you pay attention, categorizing everything as light, dark, good, bad. The last book, the third book that I've written, it's called Luminous Darkness, an Engaged Buddhist Approach to Embracing the Unknown. And I talk about, with great passion, the need for endarkenment alongside enlightenment, because I believe there's been so much of a misinterpretation of enlightenment, and it's led to so many people on different spiritual pathways trying to transcend experience, trying to push away shadow rather than embrace and alchemize, trying to go up, up, and away to get to the light instead of coming home to our bodies, coming home to the earth, also coming home to the field of relationality. I'm very passionate about every moment of our lives as our meditation. There's need not be any difference between sitting on the cushion and how we're engaging in life if we know meditation is essentially about remembering and expressing who and what we really are, but more through a kind of getting out of the way and emptying than trying to hold on to a kind of idea, again, concept mind of like who I should be or what the right mindful or Buddhist practitioner is, or how I've been taught I should be.
Yeah, it's I think it's such an art form to be able to stay fully present while also acknowledging, and while also um that I feel that phrase of like making progress. But I kind of think like, what is progress? What is um what is it really? So you're a great person for me to ask this question, and it's a comment and a question, but I think it's really when we deal with like the traumas, and then we also have aspirations. You've had so much that's come through you in terms of the writings, the books, and your mindful living revolution, and the workshops you've done. And I mean, uh, I think to kind of call upon your I've really loved hearing you on some podcasts talk about endarkenment. And um so there's both this thing of like the paradox of living with this mindful but understanding relational contexts and interpersonal realities. And then but then we can have these instances that can mire us, or can make us want to transcend them, like get away from, or just make it through, or pass through and make it to the other side. And but I know there's enough people who are aware of this, that if you spend all of your time trying to make it and you miss the journey, you miss the joy, you might miss pain. But when you recollect that and cohere yourselves to what you might have passed through, eventually the pain will make its way to you. And so, what better way to handle it than by living through it, so it can alchemize within you? Um, so, that's a comment. And then I really like how you talk about endarkenment, because for me too, the most beautiful moments that I can think of are, I love the sunrise, but I really love it when it's the darkest right before, so I can see what it's like to not see anything, and or not to see the sky lit up, and then the smallest, from starlight to sunlight. The same thing with sound. I love how you lead like stillness and silence retreats. And um, can you share with us, like, what are those paradoxes that come to you when we think of light and dark, and silence and voice? Are there times when you really feel like silence doesn't serve you, and you need the voice, and you need the dialogue? And what are ways that people can really tune into that paradox of understanding, like, sometimes silence isn't what we need, and we need the voice and the communication? And how can people learn what they need more in instances?
Well, There's so much in what you just shared. So I'm going to back up a little bit before moving forward.
Okay.
First, I want to say, there's a Vajrayana teaching that's very foundational. Obstacles do not block the path. Obstacles are the path. Obstacles do not block the path. Obstacles are the path. We're
Mm-hmm.
helping us to let go of those made up, conditioned ideas we have about what the path should look like and what it means. It's sort of ego's way of measuring, oh, I'm getting somewhere, I'm on the path, and then something happens. We think we've fallen off. And the ego has no way of measuring, of even perceiving the unfolding, emergent, I'm not going to use the word progress, just
Mm-hmm.
evolution of consciousness deepening. Okay. And I also want to say you present something earlier about, how easy it can be for people, I think in any practice, to get kind of caught sometimes, maybe especially towards the beginning, in um, trying to get somewhere or attain something. Um, this practice is going to take me from here where I am to over here where I want to be, where I need to be. Something I've always really loved about Zen practice, and something that drew me to Zen in my teens, was really the notion of the pathless path. Uh, that what we're engaging in is a continual practice of remembering the already awakened state. We could say reawakening to who and what we already are. We could say realizing that true nature already exists. It's already here. It's already here, and that's a very different kind of orientation than I'm unwhole as I am. There's something wrong with me as I am, but I'm going to try to go up, up and away to get to some enlightened state. Does that make sense so far?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And that
definitely.
always really deeply appealed to me, and the notion that every moment, there's an immediate, through direct experience, awakening that happens in every moment, alongside the maybe over time, yeah, progression, maturing. Spiritual maturity is such an amazing thing. Those two both happen, the immediate in the moment awakening and something that matures over time. Maybe now back to your actual
Mm.
question. And so you're asking me to talk a little bit about the balance, and also how people bring their own embodied discernment to, you know, expression and contemplation, uh, voice and stillness or silence. Is that so?
You said it better than I did. So yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. Yeah. I'll start by saying the way I teach very much a path of earth based, embodied, and engaged Buddha Dharma, engaged Dharma. And part of what I mean by that is that we're allowing everything in our life experience, again, to be our meditation, everything in our life experience to awaken us, to call us forth. And while there can be times when we go into silent retreat, and I spent 7.5 years as a monk living at a silent Buddhist monastery because I knew and sensed, that's where my spirit was pulling me to go into a deep, far away from the everyday world and the human built world, a deep conversation with the elements, with spirit, with life, free of some of the artificial layers that the human world can bring. And I also came out of that experience by choice into a much more expressive, phase of my practice. Just for listeners to know, I moved from silent monasticism directly into the city of Los Angeles at that time. I say is not a move I recommend to anyone. A little dramatic, but it really called me as a teacher to clarifying and helping people clarify what a practice of relationality looks like. We don't need to, and fewer people than ever are doing their practice at the silent monastery these days, the marketplace, the world as it is, your life exactly as it is, offers the perfect space for your awakening. I like to remind people that if we're passionate about going beyond duality, if we find that there's something kind of repetitive and boring about the conditioned insistence on duality, light versus dark, uh, spirituality over here, real world over here, um, activism over here, contemplation over here. Like, if we're a little bored by that and we've known and tasted something beyond binary, then we become very, very awake to the both and in every moment, like moment by moment. I encourage people to be practicing deep listening to both the silence and the words, to both the sounds and the field from which sound arises. This is just one example, Neil. But to attend to what's here and changing. And so emotions are always changing, thoughts are always changing, energy is always moving and changing, as you know, and also to attend to that which is unchanging. And that's awareness itself, that's consciousness itself. Another way I could describe it, I don't want to get too philosophical for people, it's
Mhm.
just that, all of light arises from dark. So all creativity, all insight, all new ideas, all fresh formations arise from darkness. And so for me to be truly awake means to be awake to the field or constant backdrop of darkness from which all of light arises. So simultaneously, in Zen, we talk about this as form and emptiness as in sacred interplay constantly.
Mhm.
So I could pause there, but I will add one more piece because you said, how can people, tune into when they need one versus the other? There's a way I like to talk about power and what is authentic power, not the kind of toxic top down power that's been popular in the world up until this time. And it's that authentic power is our ability to give and receive love moment by moment, not like pink Hallmark card love, real deal love, moment by moment. And that happens both through our receptivity, which is the stillness, the silence, our capacity to truly listen, to listen to ourselves, to listen to others, to listen to nature, to listen to life. That all happens in a stillness. And equally, through our ability to express from love, from truth, from presence. So we need the receptive and the expressive to be standing in our power, shared power. So I've said a whole mouthful, but what does that bring to life for you right now, Neil?
Hmm. Oh, that's you know good. I'm steeping in it. I think the more silent I am, the more I'm receiving. So um, this is good. So I it's interestingly you brought up one of these times for me that um, how I've really embraced uh, intensity to arrive at quiet and calm, or vice versa. But I remember it just brought back to a memory of I think it was about 10 years ago, and um, I was to Palm Springs, I think, just a brief trip, and so I was engaging in some meditative movement and mapping is just one of my systems that I enjoy to integrate in. But with this specific day, it was like the light was coming. I like, closed my eyes to, enjoy the sunlight. And of course, the sun coming through the eyelids was illuminating the floaters in my view. And I remember I was having a really hard time with my vision at that time, with like specifically some issues in my cornea. So um, I won't give too much context because then it takes away from, I think, what you were saying. But I engaged these little shapes that were floating around, and I saw one really clearly turn into a long snake. And the more I
Mhm.
focused on it and magnified my attention on it, it grew larger. But then I saw another floater, and for me, this was a movement practice that I got lost in. And I was in such bliss as I engaged with this one that I'm going to call it Pac Man. It wasn't, but it came over and it unfurled that snake and turned it into something that wasn't dangerous. And, anyways, by the end of this session of movement, and I was moving my body while I was closing my eyes and engaging in my intuitive movement. And, but I was using like eyes closed eye movements to see if I could unfurl the floater, and it did. And in the end, I feel like all the floaters reduced to barely anything.
Mhm.
Um, and what I enjoyed through that was this constant conscious tuning in to what my body needed to do to move, and
Yeah.
also to what needed to happen in my field of view. And wonderfully, my vision, my eyes got way less aggravated, and it helped me through a difficult time in that moment. So I just remember thinking like that was beautiful, and I don't want to do anything differently in the past in that moment. I'm so happy I labored through some of those moments, because it was quite a beautiful movement practice that happened.
Yes,
So,
yes, and part of what I hear you pointing to is the deep attunement that you dropped into, a subtle body listening. Because when we're talking about listening, it's not necessarily auditory, it's
mhm,
energetic, tactile, happens on so many levels. And so you were in this somatic practice, really deeply attuned within, subtle body awareness. And also going back to something we were talking about earlier, I hear that you're describing an experience of not turning away from what was happening, but
mhm,
welcoming what was happening, really getting even more and more present to it. And that's part of what allowed the self healing, right, to unfurl on its own. So I
mhm.
love that way you described that experience.
Yeah, thanks for putting those words to it. That really helps me. So you're great at articulating, because I feel like you've journeyed through these waters, and the various ways in which our, as you said, subtle body and our experiences can accord with us, can um, bring resource to us, and um,
Can I say one more thing about that?
please
I
do.
used the phrase earlier in our conversation, getting out of the way,
Hmm.
getting out of the way. How do we get out of our own way so that we can just show up empty and open in authenticity?
Hmm.
How can we get out of our way as leaders? I teach a lot of embodied leadership so that we can let life lead through us, let energy move through us. In Zen, we talk about, returning to true nature also as a return to no self, just who we are, empty, letting life animate us instead of the ego, busy, 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 trying to be someone and, and do something all the time. So, this getting out of the way is also something I hear in what you're describing there. And I think what's fun is that we can bring this getting out of the way and this kind of attunement, listening deeply to get out of the way to everything we do. We can bring it to conversations instead of showing up in that sort of controlling stance that wants to fix or solve or change someone. We can turn towards what's happening welcome everything that's here. And then through receptivity and attunement, through deep listening, get out of the way and let something healing unfold on its own. And I also experienced that in a way in your healing work. There's an attunement, you
Mhm.
know. So anyway, I think it's important to really underline attunement. It might be the spiritual revolution that our world most needs right now.
Mm.
Deep
Yeah,
listening.
wow.
I'll pass it back to you.
No, that's so good. I mean, yeah, I find myself wanting to ask you about so many things. I want to go back to those 7 years of you in the monastery, the monastic living, and the what was that like? I want to ask you questions about that. I also want to ask you about, some of the like a recent event you did, and then also about the ones coming up at Esalen. Mostly because I just want to be at all those places, past, present, future. And I can't wait to go to an event that you curate, that you host, just because I can tell how much I would glean from it and receive from it. But yeah, if you could like just share, uh,
Those 3 fields of time.
yeah, I mean, going back to those 7 years, I mean, what I I just feel like to be in those years of time. I know I've heard you, and I'll give context to I've heard you speak about some of what you did learn. I've also heard about how in one way coming from there you really were going towards something that you felt was more resonant with. So I know I've heard you talk about some of the difficulties of that time, but also the joys. So what was the joy of that time? What was like a moment you brought to, or that you could bring us to, where you knew in this moment, like, this is where I am, and no one else is, or at least you are here uniquely, and Deborah Eden Tull in this moment, in this monastic environment, like, how did I end up here to be privy to this, so to speak?
Well, I think the way I wanna answer that is first to say that, I think just the moment of even first arriving, uh, first landing there was one of those moments because it was for me a moment of courageously, even though my ego was kicking and screaming and dragging its feet and saying, "What are you doing?" Courageously listening to a calling,
Mm,
courageously dropping at the age of 26 what I thought I should be doing, what was expected of me to be doing. I mean, I come from a generously unconventional family, but there are always conditioned expectations or even just what our circle is doing, and to do something so radically different that I knew I was listening to spirit calling me deeply. And that is something I have continued throughout the rest of my life, listening to spirit calling me and directing me deeply. And this is going to take us back to deep listening and receptivity, because we might spend plenty of time shallow listening, listening to um, the voice of should in our head or ideas and concepts we've been fed. But when we let ourselves become more empty, and again, get out of the way, we can hear our conversation with the cosmos. And that was important for me at
mm,
that age to follow that call. Um, I perhaps thought that I would spend the rest of my life as a monastic because, in a way, I still feel like a monastic. And what I mean by that is, I'm a devotional being,
mhm,
and every day of my life I live in devotion to practice. But I also got called out for various reasons. It was part of my service here, part of my heart's offering to live and teach out in the world instead of in that form, and to take my practice into an even more expressive and creative phase. I've come to teach what I describe as post patriarchal
mhm,
Buddhism,
mhm,
intertwined with our recognition of animism, of everything, all of life as animate, as alive. And I think had I stayed as a monastic, I would have held a more, maybe someone else's form. So
Mhm.
I let my own form of teaching express itself in a new way. But Neil, to this day, I will say that a wish, prayer I have, for every human being at some point in their lives to get a chance to do a silent retreat. Uh,
Mhm.
but also say perhaps to get a chance to do a darkness retreat. Both
Mhm.
silence and darkness offer a backdrop that allows for a reconnection with the heart of who we are that few experiences do. So,
Mhm.
I will offer that.
Mm. Yeah. There's little smatterings of that I've experienced. My wife and I were up in Vancouver, British Columbia.
Mm,
We had a travel blog for a while. I traveled to a lot of places. One of the places that we wrote about was Dark Table, and it was a dinner at a restaurant in British Columbia where it was only a few hours, but you'd go and uh, the it was meant it was uh, it was an organization, a nonprofit of those without sight to help others kind of tap into what it would be like to not have sight for it. And so you was all dark and you received your food and you talked to one another at a table and you ate in darkness and the only time you could have light is when you went to the restroom. There was a little bit of light so that
mm,
that's wise for us in that. But it was a pretty wonderful, profound experience just to have
yeah,
that sliver of time in a communal kind of environment. And
mm, mhm,
I've engaged in like silent bouts for quite a period of time. But the one that came to mind was back in 2011. I really felt provoked to set aside. I have this luxury or privilege of setting aside a month in between transitions to dedicate. And so I spent nearly like 12 hours a day for the month of June in meditation and was so robust. And
mm, mm,
so many things happened during that time, like clarity for the future. I saw glimpses of the future that I still am reverse engineering to this day, uh,
yeah.
and glimpses that showed me things. And anyways, it didn't all look like sitting silently, uh,
Right.
but it was very much the intention, and it was um, you know meditating and speaking aloud words, singing, movement, swimming, quiet, reading, meditating, pondering, visions, and oh my, I mean, like that was just I really felt that during that time, and I've had many before and after spread out times like that I really felt like I found who I was, or I got back in touch with, or also just became unified with this
Yeah.
place that we're
Yeah.
at,
I
on
love that. I love that you presence the experience of unification. And I love your description of all the life affirming things you were engaged with, but in silence, in a field of silence. Like how rich. What's coming up for me is, if nothing else, just for people to consider, many of us, we already know who we are or think we do in the domain of daylight, the world of bright lights and conversations and socializing and doing, and producing. But that everyone, my hope would be, would also get to have the experience of really uncovering who you truly are uh, in stillness, in silence, in darkness, in the realm of non doing, the
Mhm,
realm of non doing, of just being. Yeah, yeah. So I heard that in what you described in your silence experience.
mhm. Well, interestingly, I know you talked a little bit about this, and I'm gonna link to, like, I think it was the conversation with Chris on the first one you did with Chris on tangentially speaking, where you talked about a little bit more of your time there at the monastery. But I know there was the what you felt was the hierarchical infrastructure that was not necessarily serving you and was part of what you knew you needed to go to a different way. And I know you spoke to also just now a little bit ago the post-patriarchal um, movement. But I'm gonna segue to something, and you fill this in. It just I definitely want to talk with you about um, the online event you did in May, and I'm gonna read the title of it. But to me, they have a bridge where,
Yeah.
especially when we talk about hierarchical, post-patriarchal, music, unpacking whiteness, indigenous awareness, and cultural appropriation. First of all, Dawn, my wife and I, we talk about these very topics a whole lot,
Mhm.
and it's
Mhm.
very important to um, talk about in our lives with one another, and also to live with an awareness. And Dawn, my wife, is always talking for her what it's like to unpack whiteness. I don't
Mhm.
because I currently don't that's not but for me, just to talk with her about that and be a sounding board, but also to be aware for me of how, I have privilege and I have responsibility, especially being here, that some of my ancestors didn't have, and some of the so maybe not to unpack too much of my own experience with this, but also just to know we're living in a place I always wanna be aware of in our land and in my behavior. I do not want to appropriate. I really want to work hard to ensure that not only am I not actively appropriating any cultures, any people groups, or any persons, but I'm but what I am, I want to make sure that I'm not being silent to what is happening around me that is engaging in appropriation. So first of all, I just would, you know, I'm very thankful to be with someone who carries this as something you care about. But then not only that, you held this event. So I'd love to hear more on that from you if you would be able to share.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So just to set a little context, it can be quite popular in the sort of modern day meditation and mindfulness world to sort of become an I doing practice or doing meditation or doing mindfulness to try to get, again, enlightened, a sense that it's like my path, a
Mhm.
sense that it's my liberation, a sense that this is something I'm doing for my healing. When we widen and broaden the field and recognize that if collective liberation is centered as our intention, if collective liberation is centered as why we're showing up, whatever your practice is, we access an immeasurable, far greater degree of courage, of compassion, of love, of joie de vivre, for the collective. We wake up together. We don't wake up in isolation. I think that's a major myth of sort of modern day spirituality. People thinking they're doing practice just for themselves or in an isolated way for their own enlightenment. So, in the spirit of collective liberation, this is a lot of uh, the why I offer the work that I do. And it's a recognition that waking up, remembering, interbeing as who and what we are, it wakes us up to the joy of interbeing. We get to experience so much more connection and, as you said earlier, unity and uh, oneness with everything, with the natural world, with the visible and invisible. We also wake up to the radical responsibility of interbeing. And it's not like responsibility, like, oh, this weighs heavy on my shoulders. It's a passionate, joyful responsibility. I get to bring so much more subtle awareness to the ripple effect of how I move through the world. I get to bring so much more consciousness. This is not I, Eden, but I, all of us, any of us
Mhm.
who show up with that responsibility. Um, the gift of feeling my impact on our collective and showing up, to do this work, not just on my behalf, but on behalf of the ancestors, on behalf of all beings. Like, I'm trying to describe the level of joy that
Mhm.
it elevates our practice to. And so then when we're approaching work, like, let's unpack whiteness together. Let's unpack lack of Indigenous awareness and expand our awareness. Let's bring even more care to how we remain conscious about cultural appropriation. It's really a path of joy. And this is important because it's hard work. It's hard
Mhm.
work. There's so much to continually wake up to. Our collective shadow, as I don't have to say, as we go deeper and deeper into the poly crisis we face today, no one listening, is surprised when I say that our collective shadow is uh, ginormous. Let's use a made up word. And the work we have ahead of us, certainly it's the work of this lifetime, to give ourselves to the healing. And I'm going to use the word the self healing, because again, when we bring a willingness to turn towards rather than away, stop pushing this stuff away, projecting it onto others, saying it's out there, but it's not in here. We're just deeply limiting our seeing. And if we actually want to be seers, we get to recognize patterns from the micro to the macro, patterns that exist of colonialism in me, of patterns that exist in the macro, the pattern impact, like as a fractal of
Mhm.
capitalism and patriarchy and deep disconnect from the natural world. And we recognize the liberation that's actually available to us beyond these artificial, I can't emphasize that word enough, artificial constructs. So much for me about engaged meditation practice is our willingness to go beyond the mind of construct and concept and drop into an embodiment that helps us through direct experience remember who we actually are, and then through inquiry, through not an analytical intellectual inquiry but embodied inquiry, to get to ask questions that help to reveal to us conditioning that it's time to let go of because it never was who we are.
Hmm. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. And then we can become better allies to everyone,
Mhm.
including to ourselves, because
Mhm.
of so below, as within, so without. It goes back to what we started with, talking about really the spirit of friendship and befriending and what it means to truly show up in allyship to, oh, we could start with uh, people of color and indigenous nations and the more than human world and the invisible world and those parts of us who we want to other and reject and call unwanted. And let's get past that. It's so spiritually immature. It's so not a good time. It's so unnecessary. Instead, we could welcome everything into wholeness and then recognize the allyship that comes from a much, much more generous place because we're not wasting energy battling or demonizing or using the hierarchical perception lens that sees superior, inferior in anything. And just to weave this back into our conversation about the monastery, many, I'm Gen X, so many of my Gen X colleagues and we're doing a lot of work in Buddhism around uh, creating maybe fresh forms for teaching, fresh forms for being in community together. It's one of my core passions that really emphasize and look deeply with an investigative heart at what is shared power. What does it mean to create um, communities that are really sharing power? Because the imprint of power over, of hierarchical relationships is so popular in human consciousness. We all know, I don't have to go into it, the depth of harm and trauma that's been caused by that imprint. And we're seeing it right now in our country, like rear its head back up in a way that
Mm.
is mind blowing. But we've got a lot of good work to do there, good, joyful work to do there. So that's one of the things I became awake to as a monastic was there's so much uh, goodness happening here. It would be my wish that everyone get to have a practice like this in their lives. And I'm curious about how, again, from post-patriarchal perspective, we could bring a different way to teacher-student relationships, mentor-mentee relationships, ways communities relate. Um, oh, the whole field of relating. There's a body of work that's very alive for me right now called The Ecology of Intimacy. And it's based on 9 principles of relational mindfulness that I wrote about in my second book. And it's very much about how do we return to uh, shared power. Going back to a phrase I shared earlier, power as one's ability to give and receive love moment by moment. Yeah. And love not oft as a like lofty idea, but something very deeply embodied and pure and sturdy, resilient and generous. Yeah.
So much in that what you just shared to ponder, and I think it's really clear that when you're, I don't know the word, staking your life on it, or when you place a value of this degree on these very important, I don't want to call them topics, but substrates of existence, um, how can they not be your focus? Meaning, I came to this awareness late in my life, thankfully, because my wife has really opened my eyes to some of this. I probably was aware and conscious through my upper teens and 20s of some of the negative impacts of this, or seeing it play out in my Indian heritage and the history there. So I would see it, but it was almost like I wasn't behind my eyes, present in my body, cohered, still dissociated.
Right.
So I feel like I was there, and it was like, okay, I'm seeing this, but then to be way more unified within myself, and way more, I don't know, contiguous would mean like next to people, but adjacent to people, feeling like linking arms and connected to people, to really feel like, oh, that hurts me when I see someone suffer. It hurts me, um, because I know that I am okay, and if they are hurting, then I hurt with them, because uh, in the construct of, if why should they why are they hurting, and why are we harming, why am I not defending,
Mhm.
so I
Yeah.
think now my meditation looks like being consciously aware of that, and then living with that in my mind, because if I don't, um and if I just focus on the trees in front of me, even though that's beautiful too, and I want to see them sway, I want to get lost in the sway of the leaves and see the way that wind interplays with the leaves, and be aware of the beauty of that. But at the same time, if I'm not aware as well of the person next to it, or the people struggling, and I mean not just visually in what I'm seeing, but people groups all around the world, then it's like, ah, I'm taking myself. I think it's going to speak to something you said earlier. I'm not an ally to myself. Of
Yes. Yes.
course, I'm not an ally to those who need our allyship, but
Mm.
I'm not an ally to myself. Then that is an awakening for me like I said, that happened more consciously more in the last couple of years.
Mhm, mhm,
And
mhm.
when you're gonna, I'm gonna let you jump in. So please, yeah, share.
Thank you, because you can tell energetically I want to.
Yeah.
I hear you pointing in different words also to the difference between seeking individual enlightenment and collective liberation. Like there's a recognition, oh, my uh, liberation is tied to the person beside me, uh,
Hmm.
tied to my care for their well being. I can't, from real presence, not feel completely impacted by any harm being caused to anyone, any being. And so to just appreciate something in what you shared, Neil, is I heard you kind of describe the difference between like, yeah, you were aware on one level of this stuff, maybe for a long time, but then, and let's appreciate your wife for opening up your eyes and heart even more. Something shifted where you became more able to see it in the moment. That's what seeing is, being able to see in the moment maybe how these patterns can arise, how these conditioning can play out within ourselves, within a group of people we're sitting with down to have dinner with, within a workshop field, a community with neighborhood. That particular workshop that happened more recently about unpacking whiteness was for a specifically for people who facilitate groups because it's so important, in the name of really creating inclusive spaces of allyship to bring more nuanced awareness to that. And if people listening are interested, that's one we'll be offering again. So
Oh,
yeah.
great. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. I think you and Dawn would have some amazing conversations. She just graduated with her PhD in embodied validation from, CIIS, and she really has been a flashlight for me to look and see of consciousness and awareness, and I think the word responsibility as well. To
Mhm.
take that word not as a burden, but like you said, but to take it as like I have an awareness and a responsibility to acknowledge with integrity what I'm aware of, and with what privilege and also what opportunity I have to speak for people, whether of
Yeah.
color or whether those are subjugated, or the people of Gaza, the people of all these, the people, when we see
Speak on behalf of life.
of life, and to see, um, I was just messaging with somebody I would call a colleague, um, who is a practitioner, and he's a chief of medical care for um, you know uh, an organization, and you know it's up in the tribal care up in Northern California, and I see for him, this person, he bleeds care, loves caring for babies and moms and all people. And it's like he wouldn't want to do anything else because it puts him in contact with his way of being able to contribute. And likewise, there are moments where, especially for me, I feel when I see patriarchy, overcoming, and I see the feminine voice suppressed, and I see like, as a, polarities, we could say so much about that there's the polarities are there, and also to say that I think there are times that if we have an opportunity and oh, there's responsibility, then to not be, whether it's to speak or to do. um, I I don't walk around, well, I'm not going to speak in a negative, is it is my hope and aim to be fully in contact with what I have the opportunity to speak to,
Mhm.
especially when it can benefit someone else, and when it can lift up someone who isn't in a position to lift themselves up. I think it's the condition of humanity and the collective liberation that you speak of that I've so enjoyed learning from you in that, is that it gives voice and words to things that I kind of stumbled into, but it's that we, um we can really not disconnect ourselves from others if we really are aware. And if we really are aware and connect ourselves with others in the way that we see we can be, then how could we not feel when there is something
Yes.
giving or taking away rather in that continuum? So,
Thank you. Very well said. Beautiful. And just an aside, when Mark and I, my husband, come through Santa Barbara next, we'll connect with you and Don, talk more
oh,
about
yes. Yeah,
it.
that would be wonderful. Yeah. Oh, I know. I also want to know more about so a couple things here. You can decide the order because I really want to both talk about these Esalen events that I will sadly miss because first of all, I love Esalen Institute, and then even more, I love what you have done there and are doing there. So I'd love to hear more about those. Um, and but I also want to hear, you know, afresh. What I want to ask you about your personal legend. I want to ask you. I want to give context to this beautiful book Paulo Coelho wrote, called The Alchemist, which was a muse for the title of this podcast, as was my work in airway centered healthcare, where it started with how can we go from a compromised airway to an alchemized airway? But then Dawn, my wife, suggested, what if you take out the airway? And and it's like, yes, it's more about life and going from compromised to alchemized. So, what would you like to speak to first of those two?
Sure. I'll first share a little bit about Esalen.
Yeah.
And just, I lead all kinds of retreats and also online journeys and trainings, and some are in silence. And at Esalen, we are not. Though I have had people show up to an Esalen workshop
Mhm.
thinking they were coming to one of Eden's silent retreats.
Yeah.
Incredible surprise. So it's a very social field there that has room for both introverts and extroverts, has room for both contemplation, just resting your belly on the earth, overlooking the ocean, or resting in the healing waters, and also really rich and healing community experience. So, the upcoming workshops this year are first deep time, slowing down as a revolutionary act. And I've been teaching on deep time for years. It was based on a Zen teaching called Uji, or being time. The 12th century founder of Soto Zen offered this teaching about letting our association with linear time and time
Mhm.
is moving forward, dissolving, and really recognizing that from presence, we get to rest in a nonlinear field. We get to rest in the three times, past, present, and future at the same time. The Buddha was a social revolutionary, a social reformer. I like to remind people, did not hold separation or duality between contemplation and the healing of the world. And uh, slowing down is a revolutionary act, especially as we face acceleration with the poly crisis. In slowing down and knowing how, not just while on retreat, but when you're back at home in your everyday context, to attune to connection with source, moment by moment, amidst the busyness, amidst the many choices we get all day long to respond consciously or react, um, to tune into our own organic rhythm, rather than, many people through disembodiment have kind of a relationship with the body that's like, I'm using my body as a tool, or I'm forcing myself to keep going even when it's not authentic, or I'm so there's many ways that we'll explore deep time. It's also a phrase that points to geological time, the actually unimaginable for us. uh, Expansion of time, when we recognize that our earth bodies are connected to the elemental world, which has, human beings have actually been here for only a tiny glimmer of that. And that opens up, in my experience, our sense of possibility possibility for our lives, possibility for the world, possibility for what we are capable of, possibility in terms of perspective in a very useful way. So I'll pause there. And the other workshop happening at Esalen is called Fluidity in Motion. And it's
Mm-hmm.
presence, play, spontaneous awareness. So when I teach there, it's really a mix of stillness meditation, movement meditation, and dance, relational mindfulness, time in nature, inquiry. So if there are listeners who would want to join for any of those, we do still have some space, not too much, but this is happening at the end of August.
I saw August 21st, right? I think is when it starts. And I saw the titles and I immediately was like, this is meant for me. How am I not, first of all, there? Fluidity and it's just so much of the way I love to engage with life and existence. And then, yeah, deep time. Oh my gosh. I was reflecting on experiences I had with, time as a being back in 2012, and which really helped revitalize and change my view and live life very differently after that. And it's a dance I've still continued, but I thought, oh, to be at these gatherings. So I think the first one is I think it was August 21st and maybe 22nd, and then the other ones were right after that.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
a 3 day and a 5 day.
Yes, this is exactly when I'm going to be in Manhattan, Long Island, the Hamptons, when I'll see Rob. So I'm glad for those events and I'm glad for those things, but I'm also thinking, how can I be in both places at once? So,
Well, that's the next step. I think the
yes,
ancient Tibetans were very skilled at bilocation.
I
Once humans make it through this phase in our evolution, we can hang out in that phase.
I'm gonna see what I can do. I'm gonna work on it. I've got 2 months to
Yeah,
figure that
yeah.
out. So, I know. Okay, well, we will have links to that. So clearly, and I know, people can find you on Instagram with Mindful Living Revolution. But before we jump to that part of our conversation, I would love to hear you share about your personal legend. And by that, I mean a legend is a story. So it's just, what is your story? But maybe in the languaging of the alchemist, it's this phrase that Melchizedek, this mystical king, says to Santiago the shepherd as he wanders through this town. And he says to Santiago, he says, the universe conspires in your favor when you are in pursuit of your personal legend. And clearly you have been in pursuit of many things. And so could you share with us what do you feel your um, Paulo does say it's your dream. And then also I believe there's also the words of destiny, story, purpose, what you're put on this planet to do.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. We could throw in the word, calling,
Mhm.
um, the way that we show up in devotion to the miracle of life. Yeah.
Mhm.
I will first say that I feel that I've been very lucky here because I've been in touch with my legend, my calling from the time I was young.
Mhm.
That's something I've simply always been in touch with. And part of what uh, supported uh, that, there's both light and shadow. The light of coming from a family that's was very generously nonconforming and really um, had a lot of good mentors in terms of people following their heart's calling. And it takes courage to follow calling. So that was the light. And the shadow was the experience of, losing my dad at the age of 11, watching someone who is healthy, thriving, really a spiritual anchor in our community, who was loved by so many, just find out one day out of the blue that he had 1 month left to live expectedly. And for me at age 11, that informed me deeply. That informed me on the avalanche of impermanence. Doesn't matter who we are, doesn't matter what life we're living. Uh, Everything is impermanent. And to meet the teacher of impermanence from a young age really fortified fortified a sense of, okay, there's not time to waste here. And I already have a deep tuning fork to my inner calling, so let's follow that and let's not waste time. And very simply, very simply, I could say that I'm here to serve collective liberation. I'm
Mhm.
here to help people remember who and what we truly are, who and what we already are, because so much, again, is about getting out of our own way, letting the artificial overlay dissolve so we can recognize who we are underneath
Mhm.
and who we are together. I can also just share the simple phrase presence and partnership with nature. This is sort of the devotional path that both my husband and I share, wherever we are, whatever we're engaged in. Presence and partnership with, well, the cosmos, the visible, the
Mhm.
invisible. We have a very, I'll use the word devotional again, way of living on land wherever we live. I've been an organic gardener and farmer for many decades in my life, and that taught me the way of deep listening to nature, to life. It also helped me learn to deep listen more fully to myself. So there's more I could say about this. Many people, when they experience my work, they say, something I would describe as bringing the deep feminine back to Zen,
Mhm.
the deep feminine approach or way back to the path of waking up. And that includes, yeah, the gentle compassion I spoke with earlier and the
Mhm.
fierce, dark feminine, the dark mother, as is referred to uh, in Buddhism. So, thanks for that question, Neil. That's a
Mm.
really generous question.
Thank you for unfolding that and sharing. Oh, you said because you had this deep tuning fork to your inner calling. Because so I would love to know more about that. I mean, I like to know the personal legend for me has double meaning, not only your story, but also like a key on a map that serves as a little guide, for
Mhm,
or symbols that, you help you navigate this map, let's say, that is your life or the path or,
mhm,
but I think often I do mean like, m- what are the ways, whether they be conscious practices or just life pillars
mhm.
that keep you attuned. So, can you explain more of that and how that comes to you?
Sure. On one level, I would say, our earth bodies, and when I say our earth bodies, I'm acknowledging that the human body is not separate from, but an expression of Gaia consciousness. And when we recognize there is no separation, we have a much more deeply expansive um, view into and sensing into our innate natural intelligence,
Mhm.
the living intelligence of Gaia as it animates us. So our earth bodies are an instrument for interbeing, for
Mhm.
relationality. When I speak of tuning fork, I'm talking about, again, my own receptivity to and attunement to the inner knowing. The still small voice within is sometimes a way we talk about it, but it's actually more about attuning into field consciousness. When someone has an insight and they're like, I just had an insight, my insight. I would question, perhaps it's all coming from field consciousness because there is no separation. There is no separate self. That's the grand illusion. There is no separate self. And it's interesting to me because as a young person, I remember living in a world where it was like society and school, and they all wanted you to like develop this sense of separate self and this
Mhm.
idea of how this separate self was going to make it, compete, express themselves, be special, more special than others in this competitive, isolating world. And, you know, that was all bogus. That was all made up. And I never really drank that Kool Aid anyway. Didn't resonate with me, but it did cause me some suffering for a while, feeling like, oh gosh, how sad is that? A world where we're isolated and separate, needing to compete. And when we instead drop into really honoring ourselves as an expression of consciousness and recognizing the consciousness in everything, which means we're never alone. I've been in some of the most painful moments of my entire life, getting to uh, drop into in that moment the expansiveness of, and even right here, not alone, never alone, never alone. Um, there's a great freedom in that. There's a great freedom in that. So there's a both and of
Mhm.
honoring and celebrating consciousness as it arises through this being, this incarnation, and uh, the consciousness in absolutely everything. And being part of that, that's that's what joy is for me. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
Oh, this and I love the um some of these words that you shared, like endarkenment and as well. I really enjoy the word interbeing. Can you share with me when you coined it or came across it?
Well, I can say that I believe I coined the word endarkenment when I was um, kind of receiving the calling to write Luminous Darkness.
Hmm.
And I was going through something I write about in the beginning of that book. It was actually a time that I was teaching in Big Sur at Esalen. It was
Hmm.
midnight and I was under the night sky. And I had a deeply mystical experience that kind of put me into a sort of cocoon of contemplation, transformation, a very nonlinear journey for about 3 weeks. And that's sort of how the book became uh, something I committed to. And it was just very clear of all the ways that darkness had been my greatest teacher. And then that term endarkenment came up as I was writing about like what beyond how enlightenment, because I don't want to disenlightenment, that's a
Hmm.
valuable pursuit, but has been misconstrued in many ways and become limited in many ways. What else? What else
Hmm.
really serves collective awakening in this age of change? And that's how that came through. And it also points very much to the revaluing of the yin alongside the yang, the yin and yang in sacred interplay. But this is a world where the dominant paradigm still discounts the yin
Hmm.
profusely all the time. The term interbeing is not one I coined. That term came through Thich Nhat Hanh.
Mm.
And language. We've lost a lot of our legacy of spiritual language, probably most of it, across the globe that humans had for such a long time. Much of it has been replaced with marketplace language. But when I hear particular terms that just land, and I know like this is going to live in my heart forever and ever, interbeing is one of those. It's just, thank you, Thich Nhat Hanh, for that term. And in his description of it, the first time I heard it, one of the ways he was really drawing it out is just saying like take a piece of paper, even by just calling this a piece of paper, as if that's a conclusive, fixed in this moment in time, non-changing, separate entity, piece of paper. Not at all. This piece of paper, from the lens of interdependence, actually includes in it an evolution over time from cloud formations that formed water that fell upon the earth and moistened the bark of the trees that went into this paper, and like really drawing it out. That's a really simple way that he presenced that.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Simple, yes. However, yeah, very pulling in and drawing in, and it's a really, there's a gravitational force there that
Mhm.
I think contemplating this very simple, conscious awareness of a object, but it's not. It is a process. It's being. There's being in it. There's
Yeah.
beingness. Yeah.
Everything is a living process,
Mhm.
every is a living process. Everything whatever I'm touching right now, my home is a living process. Every form of life we will ever engage with is a living process. And hopefully that can awaken um, our attunement to the sense of wonder and the sacred much more than when we perceive things as separate, isolate things
Mhm.
or conclusions. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm. Well, that's really, coming to that place of wonder as you speak of it. Well, I have such gratitude for our conversation. I have just the there's a ceremonial nature of the way you speak, and also of like a consecration of life in your words. I think it's part of the value you have for it. So getting to talk to you in that way is really, really enlivening, nourishing, and so enjoyable. So, I'm really thankful, and I would look forward to. Well, I'll look forward to all the conversations we will have, and perhaps more here, but at least in life. And so I'm looking forward to those as they come. And thanks for sharing so generously of who you are and what's of value. And I really believe um, that there's so much in what we talked about, so much in what you presented that is so substantive.
Thank you, Neil. This was a lot of fun. And just for people listening, take good care. These are really, really intense times. Take good care. And let's just come full circle and appreciate Dr. Rob Aquila, my brother in law,
Yeah, there you go.
initial instigator of our coming together. And yeah, yeah, this was great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. But please tell us, speak aloud if you would. People will have links and all of that, but how can they learn more about you and your work and what you're doing?
Sure. So people can visit my website, and it's just my full name, DeborahEdenTull.com. You can find me on social media under my nonprofit, Mindful Living Revolution. Um, There are all kinds of offerings in person and online. We recently started a Substack as well for Luminous Darkness. And, it's really important to me as a teacher. Maybe what's most important is the relational field, the field of connection. And so I make myself available. So reach out, show up. Showing up changed my entire life. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So appreciate you. And yes, for those you're watching and listening, and yet there are more there is more to you than just you. So think of someone else that you now become aware of, and who needs to or would benefit from hearing this, seeing this. Please share with them this conversation. And I want to know what you think about this. And um, yeah, as we go, and any last kind of phrase or word or image or symbol or whatever you would like to leave us with as you conclude our time together, Eden.
Hmm. Just in the spirit of embodiment, years ago, someone shared with me Zen koan about listening with our feet, and
Mhm.
when I'm dancing, but also just when I'm walking in my day, I find that a really helpful remembrance
Mhm.
to keep me in my body. So that's an offering as we exit today.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for listening to the Compromise to Alchemize podcast. Really excited to thank Jessica from Lunalux for the music. This track called Major. I want to thank Toshi, who originally did the design work for my cover art. And then I also want to thank Alyssa from my team for podcast publishing, my whole team, including Kat, for heading up my world. And then also definitely want you all to follow me on YouTube, follow the podcast on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcast. Comment, give us a rating, and also follow me on Instagram at Dr. Neil Bulchandani so you can stay tuned to my latest. Thanks so much, and you have an amazing day. This is major.